Well, good morning and welcome to Long Hill Chapel. My name is Michael. I am the lead pastor here, and I'm so glad, as I center things up in the space, that you have joined us today on this beautiful spring day. I'd really encourage you to stick around for the dessert auction afterwards, where we pay far above market value for desserts. And there are some things that I have been instructed by my wife to acquire for our family, and so it's on. And this will be like the Hunger Games dessert edition, so I'm looking forward to that. But we've been in a series called The Stretch, and it's really around this very simple idea that all of the best things in your life involve a stretch, meaning you took a risk, you did something you wouldn't normally do, you stretched out of a comfortable place, and you on purpose embraced discomfort in the hopes of what it would bring you. And there was a story that happened a few years ago. There was a man named Kyle McDonald, and he managed, this is the craziest thing ever. You can go look up his name, Kyle McDonald, after church. He managed to trade his way from a red paper clip, like the kind that you probably have sitting in your drawer somewhere, all the way up to a house in Saskatchewan. Some of you are like, what just happened there? He traded a paperclip for like a doorknob, and then he traded that doorknob for something else. And he, ended up trading it for some concert tickets, and it kind of got around there. There was a movie roll that he got that he traded away, and he ended up with a box truck. And eventually he was able to trade that up to a house. Some of you have looked on Zillow recently, or like, how do you do it? Can we talk about that for the next 30 minutes? That would be great. But if you think about it, just like that crazy story of Kyle McDonald buying getting a house in Saskatchewan from a red paperclip. Y'all are going to look at paperclips differently now, aren't you? All of our lives and every part of our lives, they're largely a series of trades. They're largely a series of transactions when you think about it. And this is just a thing. There's good versions of this. There's not so good versions of this. But every part of your life, you're trading something in the hopes of getting something. You're trading something away in the hopes of getting something better. This is really the definition of the stretch. You're trading something. You're like, I have this thing and I'm going to trade it away in the hopes that I get something better. Some of you have a job and you take another job and you're trading that away in the hopes that the next job will make more money, or maybe it'll be a better fit, or it'll be closer, it'll be more flexible, whatever it is. Here's a really profound thing I thought about a few years ago. When we're young, we literally trade our lives for resources. Like, so you go to work somewhere, you get on the train every day, you go to the city, whatever it is you're doing, you're taking the actual essence of your life. You're taking your time, your breath, your days, and you're trading them for resources. But when you get to the other end of that spectrum, you're actually doing the opposite. Very often you're saying, I have these resources. I'd like just a little bit more time. I'd like just a little bit more quality of life. And so very often when we get to the end of our lives, we end up trading resources for more life. You literally trade your time for money. Oftentimes we trade our money to get a sense of security. Sometimes we trade that to get a sense of status or standing in the world. And we even do that when it comes to faith. We even do that when it comes to spirituality. We say, I'm going to try this thing in the hopes that it gets me something. And sometimes it's as profound as like, you look around and you're like, there's this hole that I feel in my life, this God-shaped hole. There's got to be a way to fill it. I'm going to try to do that. But sometimes it's just simple. Like you had some kids, you're like, oh my gosh, this is more than I expected it was going to be. I need to be part of a place. I need to be part of something that's bigger and greater than myself. Here at Long Hill Chapel, we have a wonderful preschool. It's one of the great kind of the crowning jewels of our ministry here. And there's so many folks who bring their kids here and they're not Christians. They don't even come to church here, but they've realized that there's something important about this faith and spirituality and God thing that they want their kids to be a part of. It's part of that trait. But a good thing to do with all of these things in our lives, with these aspirations, with these hopes, with these intentions, it's always really good. And this is whether you're a person of faith or not, to look and say, how am I trading my life? What am I trading for? And is it worth it? So this thing that I've said, I'm going to give a part of my heart to this. Maybe I'm going to give a part of my inner peace to this. Is it really worth what we're getting in return? To look and say, what am I trying to get? Am I getting that thing? Is it worth it? And really the ultimate question, why am I doing this really? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I still doing this? Be brutally honest with yourself. You might not love the answer, but the truth is a great place to start. Am I making the right trades? Am I really getting what I think I'm getting? Because we live in a world where all around us, in advertising, in every part of our lives, there's voices saying, trade this to get this because this is the thing that will bring you whatever. It'll bring you peace. It'll bring you a sense of accomplishment. Most of us drive SUVs around, and all the SUV commercials are about like climbing the side of mountains. I own 2 SUVs. I have never done that. And you probably haven't either. And I don't suggest that you start. But it's this idea that if we get this thing, it will bring us a bigger life. And so this is just part of life. And I want to be clear about this. This actually determines who you become. How you go about this, the level of thought you give to this actually determines who you become. It shapes the direction that your life goes. But it's not just for us individually. It's also for us as a church. And today, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite church subject, and it's the stretch of generosity. It's a stretch, not only just in the financial sense that I'm probably going to talk about at some point because that's what churches do at some point, but how we are as people, the legacy and the life that we leave behind us. Why this matters so much. And that's really what it's about. What are you leaving behind you? What is in the wake of your life? What is downstream of your life in terms of the people, in terms of the relationships, in terms of the way that you're investing what I believe God has given you? What is the impact downstream of you really? Who is behind you and what are they experiencing as a result of you? And this is something we all want to do well. I don't think there's anyone in this room or watching online who doesn't want to do a good job with this. But the thing that's tricky about this is the sum total of a whole series of small, continuous decisions. This isn't like the one big thing that we do once, that matters too, but it's about all of these small things, all the small decisions, the changes, and the course corrections that add up over time. And the thing that's unique about this isn't just the things we do, it actually shapes who we become. So when we start to live in this way, when we start to have considered lives around this issue of what am I trading away and what am I getting and what am I leaving behind? What are we leaving behind as a church? When we begin to get into that rhythm, it actually begins to change us. It's the thing that begins to transform how we do and how we see everything. Today we're going to read a passage that is in the New Testament letter of 1 Timothy and in chapter 6. And 1 Timothy is called 1 Timothy because it was written to a guy named Timothy. You see what they did there. But the writer was a man named the Apostle Paul, who was one of the early leaders in the early church. And he's an older man at this point. And he's writing to this younger man, Timothy. And in essence, what he's saying is, this is what I learned that I hope that you get a jump on. I have the fortunate privilege of being able to speak into some folks who are a generation or a couple of generations younger than me in life. And I spend a lot of time saying, I really messed this one up. Here's what I learned. I hope you get out ahead of me as you do it, as you do it together. And so that's kind of what he's writing about. He's encouraging this younger leader in the church named Timothy. And he talks about this whole issue that we face about how we spend our lives, the trades we make, and how we are living outward. He says this in chapter 6, beginning at verse 6 and going to verse 19. He says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. So there's actually a prescription here. Godliness with something, with contentment. I won't even make you raise your hands. How many of you feel content today? Maybe a few of you do. But the world around us is not a place that leads us to contentment. You know, the balance numbers in our bank account change, maybe our address changes, maybe our circumstances change. They go up, they go down. But contentment, saying, you know what, I have enough, and the place that God has put me is enough, and what he's put in front of me is what he's actually called me to do and called me to be. That's a fleeting and challenging thing. But then he says something that kind of gives it context. We brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. So really what he's saying is you can do the trade game as long as you want. You can start at birth with nothing, and you can get to the end of your life with all sorts of things, and you don't get to take them with you. And most of you have figured that out. But we don't live as though that is the case. You know, some of you know that my dad passed away last year, and we're now in the process of kind of sorting through his affairs and his resources and his estate, and many of you have done some version of that. And it's just this really sobering thing to say, you know, here is the sum material total of a life. It's a car and some possessions and some money. And now we have to figure out what to do with it. And certainly, you know, that's not all my dad was. That's not all any of us are. But those are the baseline things. Those are the things that really ultimately, and I have to say this, they don't matter that much. They get passed on. And it's good. And it's a legacy and it's a blessing, but they don't matter that much. The thing that matters so much more for good or for ill are the people that every life has the opportunity to impact. And this should be a wake-up call to a few of you today. Because the world around us is saying, accumulate, 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 climb the next rung on the ladder, do that thing, give your inner peace away, give your kids' youth away, give your marriage away, give your relationships away. Become okay with that for what you're going to get in return. And friends, there will be a point where somebody sorts through the affairs of your life, like I am doing with my own fathers, and makes some decisions, and that will be the least important legacy that you leave. And it is super important, especially here in Chatham, New Jersey, for us to be aware of that, for us to remember that. Here's what I don't want to say. I'm not saying, you know what, accomplishment, you know, God has given some of you incredible gifts and abilities, you know, to be successful, to earn, to provide. Those are all good gifts. But the question is, why am I doing this really? What is the end result of this thing that I have traded my life for? Because there's a point at which you don't get to take that trading thing with you. And then he goes on, he says this, verse 8. I love this verse. For if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. And all of you are saying, no, we will not. And I kind of say that too. He's basically saying, you know, if you can eat and you can live indoors, you're living like inside somewhere, you'll be content with that. And we're not, because subtly in our hearts and in my heart, we're aware of all the other things we can reach for. And again, these are not bad things, but there's a point where they don't get us what we think that they get us. You've heard the phrase, quit while you're ahead. I don't know if you've ever watched somebody at Atlantic City or in Vegas or something like that. Ooh, he's talking about gambling. You know, where they win and they get ahead, but then they keep going, right? Why do people do that? We've all heard of that, where it's like, you're ahead, stop. It's the allure of what you might be able to get. It's the allure of what you could reach for next. And that is just part of human nature. And I think the thing that makes this complicated is it actually works for a while. Like there's actually studies that say, you know, if there's a point which, you know, if your earnings or your income or your financial status gets to, your life actually does get better. That's that eating and living indoors part. But once you get beyond that, it actually doesn't do that anymore. And there's a point after which it actually has the opposite effect, unless you invest the gift that God has given you in something greater. And then he speaks to that trap that I just talked about, that thing that we all do. Verse 9, he says, those who want to get rich, they want to keep going, they want to keep trading, they look ahead and they say, I might be able to if I just reach out here. They fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And this, by the way, isn't just like, financial ruin and financial destruction, or literal ruin or literal destruction. This is relational ruin and relational destruction. Because there's a point at which this thing takes on a life of its own and it begins to demand sacrifice. Like any good God or deity, it says, trade that for more of this. Trade that for more of this. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It does not say money is evil. It says the love of money, worshiping this thing, giving your heart to this thing is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and have pierced themselves with many griefs. The thing that's interesting about this word love is, love in its best context, and we've talked about that for the past couple of weeks, it implies a relationship with. And so we each have a relationship with this thing. It's not just like an inanimate object. It's not a concept. It's a relationship that we have. And our relationship with money, resources, the things that we trade for, is an incredible tell on the state of our heart. Jesus talked a ton about this in the Gospels. And it wasn't because, Jesus was buying a helicopter or, building some edifice. He was itinerant and poor. But he knew something that we ought to remind ourselves of. He said stuff like this: where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And that's not just your money. It's the thing that you're trying to accomplish and achieve. It's the thing that you're reaching for. It's the thing that you're saying, I'm going to trade more of my life. I'm going to trade my inner peace. I'm going to trade my relationships. I'm going to trade my time for more of that thing. He says, whatever that thing is, you can find your heart next to it. And so Jesus talked a lot about that, but watch what happens next. Verse 11, the Apostle Paul says, but you, and he's speaking to this younger man who has the opportunity to chart the course of his life. Some of us are a little older and our lives are kind of here. He's saying, you have some options still. So here's the option you ought to pick. You, man of God, flee from all this. And that's not fleeing from money, but it's fleeing from this relationship. And pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight, because it is a fight of the faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses, in the sight of God who gives life to everything, and of Christ Jesus, who, while testifying before Pontius Pilate, made the good confession. I charge you to keep this command without spot or blame until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ, which God will bring about in his own time. God, the blessed and only ruler, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, who alone is immortal and who lives in unapproachable light, whom no one has seen or can see. To him be the honor and might forever. So it says, don't flee from money, flee from that relationship, because it will lead you in the opposite direction of all of those other things: righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. And this is the thing, Long Hill Chapel, where it's very challenging for us to distinguish, because we all think we can live a more enlightened version of that relationship. We can do the same thing, but with some Jesus on top, and it'll be different. Friends, it will not be different. And so when we flee from this, we're saying, God has blessed us. God has given us resources. He's given us the opportunity to work and to provide and to produce and to achieve. And those are all good things. But where that goes next makes all the difference in the world. And in this passage, as often happens in the Bible, it seems like it kind of rambles off into something that sounds like one of the hymns in the hymnal. It says all this theology and it's talk about God. But here's how I think you can see it. As Paul is trying to paint a picture, he's saying, you're living here and everything in your life, it seems like such a big deal. It looms so large and so high. But look at who God is. Look at the majesty and the character and the nature of God. There is something so much bigger. There is someone so much bigger than all these things in our life that should shift our perspective in how we live our lives. You know, there's this picture on the internet. It's the picture of the galaxy, and it shows where the planet Earth is. Right up there, one of those little stars in a minor solar system. And yes, God cares intimately about us, but we're part of something that is so much bigger. And I love this picture because it reminds me often of the things that seem so large to me in the grand scheme of eternity, in the grand scheme of the world, in the grand scheme of the universe. They're small. They're much smaller. But we have been given the opportunity to take hold of a life that makes a difference. A life that is as big and as impactful downstream as it possibly can be. And so if we're not supposed to flee from money and stuff, what I do believe we can do is change our relationship with it. How do we do that? Paul gives us the how in the next verses. Verse 17, command those who are rich in this present world. Friends, that is literally every single one of us in this room. We all, and there's lots of studies and research that support this. Everybody thinks those who are rich is somebody else. It's someone else who has more, who, lives in the next neighborhood over, who has the next tier up in our organization that we work for. Statistically speaking, on your worst day, you are one of the richest people in the world. So this is all of us he's talking to. This isn't like the other people. This is every single one of us. It's literally everyone in this room. So Paul's commanding Timothy to command the followers of Jesus, and by extension, he's commanding us. This isn't like a suggestion, hey, you ought to try this out. This is what we literally have to do. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. What is arrogant? Arrogance is putting your hope in yourself, or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Key word, key phrase, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So God has blessed you, and God will bless you, but when we misunderstand the source of that blessing and the purpose of it, we miss the whole thing. Because we're tempted every single day to put our hope in any number of things. You look around you, you look at your circumstances, you look at your bank balance, you look at the bills that are due. And for most of us at some point, we feel a little bit of uncertainty about that. We feel a little bit of insecurity about that. And it tempts us to put our hope in our ability to change that number or to go after that thing. He says, you know what, that's a really uncertain place to do that. There will always be something that's going to be a moving target. Don't put your hope there. Put your hope in God, who is actually the one who has provided all those things for you. One of the things that is challenging for me to remind myself is that I am not my provider. Michael and Grace Hoddy are not their providers. God is our provider. This is a thing that we have to remind ourselves over and over again, because what happens is we subtly begin to say, you know what, I am the one who has brought everything into my life that is good. And the truth is, that's not the case. You were born with gifts and talents and opportunities, and there's things that came into your life. You are standing on the shoulders of so many different things and so many different people and opportunities and places where God has been at work and doors that he has opened for you that we are all tempted to take credit for ourselves, but it was actually God. And when we do that, it actually brings us a tremendous sense of peace. When we say, my hope is not in this, my hope's not in what happens tomorrow, my hope is in the one who goes before me into tomorrow and was already there before I ever got there and knows what I need. And so as a result of that, if our hope is in the right place, it allows us to live in a different way. Listen to what comes next. Command them, again, not a suggestion, a command, to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. 2 boys, 3 years old, 9 years old. Guess who doesn't like to share in our house? Neither of them. And so boy A, and I'm not going to use their names, will have a toy, and he's like much older, and he's had all those toys, but he sees like, there's the younger, older brother thing, and one of them sees the one that has the thing, and they want to go play with it. And I'm like, leave that alone. That you did that like 6 years ago. You can stop now. But there's this thing where we see something that someone else has, and immediately we want that thing. And as parents, we are constantly reminding our children, you did not get this on your own. This was given to you as a gift. And friends, that same dynamic is true with us and God. We like to think that we accomplished, that we achieved. Yes, you worked hard. Yes, there's honor for that. But God was the one who gave all of this to you. When we live this kind of life, do good, be rich in good deeds, be generous and willing to share, it allows us to lay up a different kind of treasure. We might have less stuff in our garage and in our closets and in our bank accounts. But listen to how he says this. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. The life that is truly life. Not the life where somebody, after you pass from this world into eternity, has to come along and figure out what to do with before the surrogate court as they manage your estate. People, relationships. I sat here this morning as, as I said, the service should have ended after the baptism, and I said, this is why this matters. This is why this matters, because of what God is doing that is changing each one of us, that will change the people downstream of us forever and ever and ever. That matters more than anything else we could possibly be doing. And that's why it's so important that we get this right. So all of us want this. Doing this is much harder. And the reason for it is because subtly we just believe that the stuff we have is another resource in this trading game. That we trade this for this, and hopefully we get a better version of this. And I think one of the things that's challenging in church, and some of you have had some church backgrounds and other experiences, and I want to speak to some of that today, is that subtly it's easy for us to try to do this with God. It's very easy for us to take the same mindset into our relationship with God. You say, how much do I have to give God so he stays off my back? Or, how much do I have to give God so he'll bless me? Think about what that is. How much do I have to trade to get the thing that I actually want? The Christian world is full of terrible graphics. I don't know if you've experienced this on the internet. There's many of them. Here's one of my favorite ones. It's a picture of Jesus and a little girl and 2 teddy bears. And I was tempted to call this message, Jesus, the teddy bear, and the bigger teddy bear. And nobody would have had any idea what I want. But this is this idea, and there's a good idea behind this, that if we give God our small thing, he gives us a big thing. The problem is, we interpret that to mean if I give my 10% to the church, or my tithe, or my offering, or I put $50 in the box, or I buy an overpriced dessert at the dessert auction, and I enjoy it, but I realize that the market value was much lower. That somehow that's the thing that unlocks God's blessing in my life. Friends, I believe that God will bless you whether you do anything or not. In fact, he already has. But you are missing out when you look at your life in terms of, I'm going to do this thing so I can get something. When you look at this in terms of what God might do through you, what God might do through us, the legacy that he'll leave downstream of our lives and in this church. That's where it matters so much. You'll hit the ceiling of this other way, but that's a way that doesn't ever run out. And so the Apostle Paul, he's trying to get us off this whole train of if I do this thing, I'll get a better thing. He's trying to get us off the spiritual version of the same thing. Look at those last verses again. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they will take hold of the life that is truly life. Do good, be rich in deeds and not accumulation, be generous, and be willing to share with others. Who lived a life like this? Jesus. Jesus was the one who came, who had all the power, all the authority, all of the opportunity. He was the one who could have deserved it all. And instead, the scriptures say he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God highly exalted him. That's in Philippians chapter 2. So he did this thing where he didn't realize, he said, my life and all that I've been given and all that I am is not for me, it's for the others around me. He gave himself for others. And there's this radical concept that really rubs up against all of the things that we know and experience here in life. We've actually been given to each other. And so here in this church, this isn't just about, coming and singing the songs and listening to me or whoever, and sending your kids downstairs. This is actually about who we are together. And all that God has placed in your life is for that purpose. It's for that reason. Think about it. What is the point of our relationship with Jesus? If it's simply to pray a prayer so we get some cosmic fire insurance and we, go to heaven when we die, we've already got it. There is no reason for you to be generous ever again with any part of your life, any part of your resources. But what if your life was for more than that, checking the box and getting the thing that you really want? When we embrace this stretch, I'm just going to say it, we may not always see what we get, but we can see who. We can always see who. So some of you are, as we close, you're telling me what I need to do, people. You're like, yes, you're telling me some things that I need to know, but what are you asking me to do? How do I know when I'm being generous with my life? How do I know I'm being generous with my time? How do I know I'm being generous with my money and my resources? Here it is. We know we're being generous when our feelings of inadequacy and insufficiency kick in. That's when you know. When you're like, ooh, I don't know if I have enough to do that. I don't know if I have enough time to do that. I don't know if I'm talented enough to do that. I've got all these other things. The future is uncertain. That's one of the things after the pandemic that's happened is we all have this profound sense of uncertainty. And it's caused us to circle the wagon sometimes with our lives in ways that we ought not to. We know we're actually being generous when all of those things that say, nope, don't do, no, kick in. Our feelings of inadequacy, insufficiency. There was a point in my life, I was right out of high school, it was before I went to college. I took kind of a gap year in between. And I was working at Toys R Us in upstate New York, building bicycles for slightly more than minimum wage, which kids, minimum wage then is different than minimum wage now. I think I was making $4.50 an hour. And I just didn't have a lot. I remember there was one point where I had $10 to my name and I was driving from somewhere and I was trying to figure out the most fuel efficient route so the $10 would cover the gas to get the distance between the two places. And I was part of this very small church in the Adirondacks that met in a converted fried chicken restaurant. And for whatever reason, I had a $50 bill in my wallet, which for 18-year-old Michael in 1995 was a really big deal. And it was like, man, it just gives you a sense of security when you look at the cushion that you have. And I was sitting in this little church, and it wasn't like, the preacher was twisting people's arms or anything like that. It was one of those moments where I just felt God say, that thing that you're putting your security in, I want you to give it to this church. I want you to give it to me. It was a $50. I still remember this. And it was the hardest thing for me to do. Because it's like, ooh, now I don't have the buffer. And good story, good ending to the story. I did give the, and it wasn't like the heavens opened and the angels sang. It wasn't like that, but I began to learn a lesson that day that I'm still learning. And I can tell you this, I could have gone and bought ice cream with that. I would not remember where I spent that at this point, but I remember that lesson. And it taught me something. Now, that was generous then. In this lifetime now, I can look back and say, I was so generous then, that was so hard, I'm going to do the same thing again. It's not the same. That's like a tip. And for many of us, that's the case. Maybe not for some of you. But we know we're doing it not about the number, but about the thing that it just starts up in us. Full transparency, I was reviewing this message this morning in my office, and I felt like the Lord saying, you need to write a check to Long Hill Chapel that you don't usually write. And so I was like, ooh, bills are coming due. It's the part of the month where preschool and mortgage and all those things come due. And again, I felt the need to be obedient, not because I'm a good person, but because this concept is the way that we kick the God of consumption off the throne of our lives. And it's something we need to do over and over and over. And I think we think that there's a time where this is all going to make sense and it's going to feel right, and it isn't. We know we're doing this when those things kick in. So how do you know you're actually being generous? You do it when whatever you're doing creates a hole in your life that you could have filled with more of you. You could do something with this. You could do something significant. You could do something you're planning on, but it creates a hole that, you could fill with more stuff and it wouldn't even be bad. But it's an opportunity that you have. Now, this isn't just a personal matter. This, like all things in the stretch, defines us who we are becoming as a church. And I want us to be a church that does this over and over again in every single place where there's a need. We step into it. We run in the direction of it, realizing that we'll never feel good about it in the moment. We just won't. But what happens downstream, the legacy that we are leaving behind us, the kind of life that matters, would make all the difference. Here's a practical goal. This year in our budget, this is the thing, I never enjoy talking about this stuff. But we're going to have about an $80,000 gap between budget and giving. We could fix that now. But here's how it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yes, we should pray. Yes, we should be wise stewards. We're trying to do all of those things. But it will happen not when a magic person with more stuff than us comes in and writes a big check. It will happen when we begin to get this. And if we get this here, I believe we'll start to get it everywhere else. I had a longtime member here come up to me and, just talking kind of in confidence, someone I've known a long time. He said this, and this really struck me. He said, if I didn't give to Long Hill Chapel, I'd probably live in a nicer neighborhood. I was like, whoa, that's something that has a cost. It's something that we feel. It's something that we look around. We say, I could do that. I could get that. I could do all those things, but they're things that do not leave a legacy behind us. And friends, this place does and is and will continue to. And I believe that that's what God is calling us into the stretch about. It's to take a step. For some of us, honestly, it's a first step, and for others of us, it's a step up. So what do we get when we do this? What do we get? You know what? You might not get anything. You might not, get the promotion. You might not get the mysterious cash in your mailbox kind of story. But you know what you do get is you get the peace of knowing that you have declared God as your provider and you've actually put him on the hook to come through. This is one of those things, by the way, in the Old Testament, this is one of the few places where God says, test me in this. He says, test me in this. In Malachi chapter 3, he's talking about this idea of the tithe, which is a sacrificial standard, this 10% standard of giving. He's saying, you can test me in this. And I'm not here to tell you what God is telling you to do or calling you to do or calling me to do. I'm here to say, let's step into this and embrace the fact that it's going to feel like a stretch. But here's where this matters downstream. It matters when we look into the past and we see how God has worked. And it hasn't been the sum total of what we have or what we've done. It's been his multiplication of our small steps of faith in a way that matters forever and ever. I embrace generosity in my life, not to get something, but to become like someone. Who are we going to be known as? Who are you going to be known as? Who are your kids? Who are future generations? Who are people you may not even know and may never meet until heaven, going to know us and know you as? And that's the stretch. Let's pray. God, we recognize that this is hard. This goes against everything in our being. It goes against everything in our culture around us that says, level up, trade up, get the bigger thing, get the better thing. But when we do this, we enter into the way of Jesus, who had it all, who deserved it all, who had everything due to him. And yet he emptied himself. He poured himself out. He gave himself. Would we be people who are not afraid of the stretch, who recognize we won't feel it in the moment when we do it, but when we do it, it unlocks something in us where you begin to be able to work, first of all in our hearts, but in the legacy that you leave behind and that we leave behind and that this church leaves behind. Would we be a place that doesn't just get over the bar? Would we be a place that is generous at every turn that it has, every opportunity that it has, pouring itself out into the lives of this community, into everyone who comes through these doors, in whatever way you call us to, because you are the one who first loved us. Help us not just be people who feel things, but help us take a step. Spirit of God, I pray that you would be clear in the step that you're calling each one of us to take. And would you walk with us every step of the way, we pray in Jesus' name.